welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and I've been corresponding with today's guest for so long, his earliest email replies were sent to me from his BlackBerry. It's Brian Garner. That is 100% true.
Are you serious? I barely remember having a BlackBerry.
I looked it up.
Wow.
2009. That was our first. I love that there's this digital footprint, like so we can look that stuff up, right? Like I can see our very first correspondence or whatever, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So thank you for hanging out here today. I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you.
I know bits and pieces of your sort of performing arts origin story. I won't just say magic, but you have a bunch of Renaissance man. But I know that like me, you got started very young and you got started in magic. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And so what was your, I know you were very active in terms of like competing, like doing magic competitions as a kid. Take it back to the very little Brian Garner. What was the very first sort of magic, like when you decided you wanted to be doing this kind of thing?
So, unfortunately, it's just like everybody else's story, was watching Copperfield on TV.
Okay.
Now, the funny thing is that most people would say it was from watching him do some grand illusion. Mine was watching him do a trick with Webster, with his pet duck.
Right, yeah.
So I knew that's what I wanted to do. Not necessarily as a living, but I wanted that to be my thing. So it goes back to when I was 6. And then from listening to an earlier podcast, which I think we texted about, I had no idea you and I had the same Harry Blackstone Jr. kit.
Right.
That kit followed me around for years.
Mm.
After that, we were introduced to Al's Magic Shop in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I think my parents thought as soon as I had a dove pan, that meant that I could start performing. So at 8 years old, which this seems to be a normal thing, it was when you talk to other magicians, the first thing I performed at was a first communion. Like I think everybody did a first communion as one of their first gigs.
Right.
And I think I made like $15 from it, and I was like, wow, this is great. So that's kind of where it started, in doing the performance. But I was also into puppets at a young age. I was a huge fan of Mr. Rogers. I still have a puppet problem today. 2 weeks ago, I got a custom puppet made from Etsy that Shannon just kind of looks at like, what are you going to do with it?
Right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that, I always loved that. I always loved, the background, the backstage of theater, the lighting, sound, all that stuff. It always interested me. Theater just interests me.
Right. So yeah.
But I was a horrible actor. So, definitely I tried out for commercials, never got that. I did plays in high school. They were horrible.
And you were growing up around, still in Maryland, like that general vicinity?
Say that again?
Where were you growing up? Were you in this?
Oh, Charles County in Southern Maryland.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's where I've been my whole life.
So yeah, and I remember we've talked before about how like we were wearing tuxedos far before like a prom came along,
Right.
And I guess what's always interesting to me is like, especially hearing you talk about Copperfield as an origin story. Do you have any sense of why then you were dressed like a magician a generation older than him? Like I would have expected, and again, I'm in the same boat, but like, I just sort of think about like, oh, I saw that magician, I was inspired, but now I need to dress like a magician. And in that case, it means putting on top hat and tails,
Well, that came later. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of pictures out there where I remember taking, an autographed picture of Copperfield to the hairstylist and saying, I want my hair to look like this.
Nice.
The only way to do this is if we put waves in your hair. Like, seriously?
Right.
I never did that. But I had the popped collar with the white shirt on and black pants. I did that for years.
Okay.
It wasn't until I saw Lance Burton perform is when I went to tuxedo and tails.
Gotcha. Okay.
So when I watched Lance Burton and I just saw that elegance and, his dove work and his candle work and his card manipulation, that I don't know, it just kind of tied it in. So yes, totally two different worlds.
Okay.
But I think as a performer, you go back and forth trying to find your style. There's some people that are, that are my age now that still haven't found their character, their style of performing.
Right.
And a lot of it comes from failure. I mean, you and I have had conversations through the years about the character development and costuming and all that. But that's where that difference went. It was Lance Burton that really, screwed stuff up for me. So thanks, Lance.
Yeah, right.
And I say that because I grew up Catholic, and so every Saturday we would go to church, right?
Yeah.
And that meant we were coming from gigs, so I would go to church every Saturday in a full tux, tails, and it got old real quick.
I mean, was everyone else dressed up at church, or were you the only one who?
Yeah, not like that.
Yeah, sure. So did you see? Was Lance Burton also on TV, or was that part of like? Did you have a chance to see him live at some point?
No, I've never seen him live.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on TV. I'm not sure what it was on. But it was his award-winning act.
I mean,
The act that all of us know.
probably world's greatest magic, right? Like that was
And that, yeah.
yeah, that was definitely formative for a lot of people in our sort of magic generation.
Mhm.
So yeah, so all right, so talk a little bit about. I never did magic competitions, and so I'm very sort of curious, like how you get into that, and why. Like, did it just seem like the thing to do, or did you feel like you had a competitive drive, or like what sort of inspired that?
So definitely no competitive drive. That was all from my parents.
Okay,
They won't watch this, but it's out there. I understand that.
sure.
My parents are those stage parents.
Okay.
If you watch Dance Moms, hi Brian. Um, so it was definitely them. I did enjoy, the build up to it. I think I liked the, building up that anxiety inside, and being scared, but being excited at the same time.
Right.
Um, so they found out they had gone to New York for a trip for work, and they had gone into Tannins
Mm.
and learned about Tannins Magic Camp and the competitions and stuff. So that year was the first year I went. I went for 3 years, so I did 3 years of competing.
Okay.
And that's a whole nother. As a kid, it makes you look at the world of magic and these other magicians you're with completely different, completely different. Not a good way.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily a good experience because I remember competing later on for an IBM event, and that anxiety that I had as a kid had come back tenfold.
Mm.
But I felt like a little kid in the corner, nervous because you didn't know what was going to happen. Now, I say all that about competing, and it's not. It wasn't bad till after I did it the first time, where I
Okay.
didn't look forward to it, because you have some of the world's best magicians that are trying. They see your competition act, and they're trying to help you out in any area. Well, these magicians and some that are huge still to this day tore me apart as a child. Now,
Right.
but they didn't do it purposefully. They were just trying to get you, to fix the routines and whatever it might be.
Right.
But it scarred me for the longest time where I didn't want to. So as the next year would come on, I would tell my parents I did not want to compete.
Mm.
Um, so for me, I don't think it was good, but it also allowed me to look at things differently as I got older and developing magic and helping friends out with their effects. So it definitely helped me out, but it was rough as a child doing it. And it might be better as an adult, but as a child it was not good at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a hard pill for an adult to swallow, that kind of, even if it is from a place of love and constructive criticism,
Right.
and you're like, what, 12 around this? Like how
Yeah, it
old?
was around that time, yeah.
Okay.
11,
Okay.
12, yeah, yeah.
And do you
I
think
know.
how much did your folks, what in terms of their goals for your show business career, how much of it was about doing gigs and making money locally, like versus do you get a sense that you were going to these magic conventions and competing so that you would be picked out by an agent in the crowd and your career would take off? Like, was it more like, I guess that was their reasoning for doing that, as opposed to just becoming Charles County's number one magician, right?
It was no the business card Peter read, Southern Maryland's professional. Wait, no, hold on. Southern Maryland's youngest professional magician.
Nice. If you put enough qualifiers on there, we all have a Guinness World Record.
Yeah, no, it was definitely the big picture.
Okay. Okay.
I remember we had this big film crew that came and we shot this huge promo video. We had, it was a big audience for Johnny Carson.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and it was not accepted. And I did Star Search. We tried all of it. That was definitely there.
Okay.
There was a bigger picture.
Sure. Sure. And at that, throughout all of that, are you basically doing what we would call as magicians a manipulation act, where you're just sort of, it's a stage act and it's under, typically under 10 minutes, and you're making things appear and disappear in your hands, or were you doing different
Yeah,
stuff?
there was a lot of that. I mean, there was dove work, there was
Okay.
manipulation. I mean, huge billiard ball fan.
Okay.
Never talented enough to do card manipulation, but
Okay. Okay.
tried for years. Yeah, it was. I mean, like for those deals, it was. We shot the whole thing. I never saw the end result that the production company sent out to these places. But
Oh, interesting. Okay.
so it was a lot of stuff. I think where they were putting the audience stuff together. But a lot of those silent acts that I was doing, because I've been doing silent acts since the first time I can remember performing.
Right. Okay. Okay. And to be clear for our listeners, silent act to music, like the point is sort of the traditional, almost throwing it back to vaudeville kind of a thing, where you come out and you're doing a routine set to music that is playing in the background,
Yeah,
as a
and I think the thing is with that is, if your eyes can do the talking and your facial expression, like
uh
it's a good skill to build at an early age, regardless of what you do. So
Yeah, well, and I know a lot of acts. You can play more places. Like if it's a venue that's loud, or if it's a venue that doesn't speak English, like you're able to do more with that as opposed to a talking act. So that makes sense. So I'm sort of then curious about, as you kind of transition out of that, did you continue to do shows locally when you sort of stopped? Competing or auditioning, or was it kind of a, was magic paused for a while and then you found it later?
yeah, no, I was still doing it.
Okay.
It was a regular thing.
Okay.
That was just something I was doing during the weekdays. Would be working on these competition acts.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it didn't change. It didn't change anything for me.
Yeah. And then, so I guess, is there a point where you say, I love the performing and I love making some money at it, but I do not love people judging me. So I'm just gonna do my thing, and I'm gonna do it around town. And like, was everyone okay with that, or were your parents? Was there a point where you had to tell your folks, like, look, I'm done. We're not doing this anymore, or was it everyone just kind of like, okay, well, we tried for Johnny Carson, it didn't happen. Let's just stay local,
I think that the timing was perfect as I was becoming a teenager.
Okay.
And I was probably around 14 then. So, you're trying different stuff out. You're trying skating. You're doing different things. I think I got into baseball cards. So I wasn't necessarily pausing it, but I think I put a pause on the passion part of it.
Okay.
But I was still performing on the weekends and stuff as a child. But I'd tell them I didn't want to do it, and I think they looked at it as, well, Brian's growing up, so he's kind of finding himself. So it wasn't.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't pressured at that point.
That's good. Yeah. No, I mean, you and I both know family acts where the parents are still pushing it and the child has moved on a long time ago, and it's painful to watch,
Right, right,
So
right,
that's
right.
that's
And I
good.
think we've all seen people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely now as, as a parent, and when somebody is asking, are you going to put your daughter into the show? That's all I can think about. Like, I can't, even if she is begging and pleading to have me be in the show. And I know, you and your son have done some stuff together on stage. But it's like I can keep a promise on behalf of me to a client, but if I'm promising a client that a kid is going to show up, I definitely don't want it to be, I don't want it to be torturous for that kid to have to perform,
Me and my wife feel the same way. When it comes to our son. So I did want him to be a part of it, and that happened during quarantine time when all the shows were virtual.
Yeah.
So my way around that was to put a costume on him, so they did
Right.
not see him. They didn't know that was my son. And he didn't have to make direct contact with the camera, because the mascot head was doing all that. So
Right.
that was my little way around that, for him to kind of get a little taste of it. But I didn't want him to be part of getting into entertainment at all.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
if a child decides they want to do that, then that's that's for that conversation for that family to have. But when you come on our part, growing up that way, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, I'm always fascinated to hear talking with folks about the sort of um, competition and the sort of the like. I can't remember a time I ever auditioned for anything. Not I don't mean that in a vain way. I mean like I didn't. There was no drive, and the only drive that was happening was coming. I was getting support from my parents, but they were never planting a seed of like, how about you do this? How about you do that? It was still coming from whatever I sort of felt like doing as a kid. And I kind of feel lucky, like by the time I got to a point where people were critiquing me, I wasn't as terrible as I know I was as an 11-year-old doing this, And so it's hard to think about when I was 12 if I was getting real honest good feedback like you were getting, but still like how much that would hurt your pride. Like I just want to do this thing that's fun.
Right,
Um,
because people are going to fill you with BS all the time, and I think there's to a certain extent you should hear, especially as a child. Like you're doing good,
sure,
But when people decide to be real, like they do, like the experiences I went through, I mean, it was traumatizing. But I also needed to hear it because it's there's times that I worked on stuff, years ago, and I remember certain things that they said, and so that helped me.
sure.
So as rough as it was then, it's something that's helped me now. But it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, again, yeah,
Different
it's
life, but competition life is just it's different.
yeah, it's very, it's yeah. No, I'm fascinated and like yeah, I'm sure that helps. Just like going to a magic lectures and reading books, like that was knowledge that you were acquiring at an early age that, for better or worse, has helped to shape your shows moving forward. And then also, like when you and I are talking about something that I'm working on, I'm sure that there are things that will sneak into the conversation that, whether you realize it or not, came from a note that you got from a judge when you were 14 years old.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's fascinating. All right, so we're sort of on to like you're working in the area, and you're not. Have you ever done any flying to a gig, or is it all pretty much just in this vicinity?
No, I mean we drove a lot, but
Okay,
we weren't going super far. I mean, we go to New York, we Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia. I mean, everything was local.
okay,
Seemed to be local in the DMV. So yeah,
sure,
there
sure.
wasn't a whole lot of that.
Okay, yeah, that's and I know you did some like illusion, like big box type stuff eventually, right?
I did some, but it didn't
Okay,
get real big. I didn't have the budget for it.
right. Okay, so it was still driving around in the family car. There was
I
never
mean, we had my grandma owned a pet shop, so we had a really big we had a big van for
nice.
when she would pick up her stuff from the wholesalers. So we would use that. I mean, we would take stuff that was out of Mark Wilson's Complete Guide,
Okay,
and we'd build that. And we used another local magician, the builder, for that. And I was a little kid, and we had a levitation unit built, and this thing cost me around $2,000, I think. And as a
wow,
child, that's a ton of money.
yeah,
And I bought it, and this thing it was not built right. I mean, this thing took four people to carry in
oh geez,
together.
uh,
So it got old quick doing bigger things, but then it was like sword baskets, things like that. But there wasn't we didn't have the budget or the space to be able to travel with this. So
okay.
um, definitely I would have preferred just to stay more like parlor where it's the distance in someone's living room than on stage.
Right, right.
Most of those props are just they cost a lot.
Yeah, well, and back to like, do you want to be a performer or a furniture mover? Like, a lot of the bigger your show gets, the more you've got to mess with stupid logistics about getting it in and getting it out, and are there steps, and do you have ramps and all that crap? And you don't.
Right, no, it's yeah. I remember one time we did. It was at a fire hall, and we had that levitation unit.
Mm,
And this time, instead of four people, it was myself and my dad.
Oh, no.
Just had to go up 3 flights of stairs.
Ah.
So the stage was in 2 parts because that is what helped make the trick work. And I mean, yeah, it was horrible. But I learned I learned a valuable lesson that now with a 13-year-old who thinks he's going on 30, tries to pull it over on me because I didn't want to carry all that stuff. I mean, you get tired of it. So when it came time to go home, oh, my stomach's upset.
Oh, nice.
I
Yeah.
got to go to the bathroom. So now that's what you get back from the grocery store. Mom, Dad, my stomach's bothering me. I got to go to the bathroom.
Ah, it's funny. Try to get out of it. Yeah,
But right, right.
yeah. Well, and so
Valuable lessons, children.
yeah, no, this is good.
Say something to you.
This is a parenting podcast now.
That's right.
We're just gonna, yeah, I like it. So, at what do you remember a time where you started doing solo, like where you would drive off to do a gig and come home, and folks would ask how it went, but like where they weren't coming with you at any point?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 16.
Okay, right, right.
When I turned 16, that's when I started doing it, and it was different. It was different because so used to mom and dad, taking you to these gigs that it was weird, and I mean, I'd definitely give them a rundown when I'd get home, but yeah, that was strange. It wasn't until I could drive
Right.
before
Okay. Okay.
right away because I needed to do that, and that's when I really started trying out different characters and styles because I didn't have my parents to see what I was doing.
Right. Right. Okay.
A little rebel, like today we're gonna do disco magic.
Nice.
It's true stories. Yeah, I think we might have talked about that years ago, but yeah.
I just my main sadness is that for like the majority of your stories, I want to see the video, and I know that it either doesn't exist or it's been lost to time, but like, I would love to see your Carson audition. I would love to see the disco magic, I guess probably better that it doesn't live on, but
The Carson audition, the raw footage does
uh,
exist.
okay. Okay. All right. Awesome.
Old VHS, yeah.
You gotta do a supercut of that at some point. That's fantastic. Well, I would love to do this again because we only talked about magic today, but you and I have a bunch of other overlapping interests that I think would be fun to sort of poke at and explore. Yeah, we'll wrap it up for now, and then we'll definitely have you back on if you're up for it. Big thanks to my buddy Brian Garner for coming here and hanging out with me. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Podcast of the Impossible. For my public shows and social media and special projects and more, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.